in the scope of this course, we are going to use PHP instead to validate our web page. Now, what is PHP? PHP means Hypertext Preprocessor. So you can see that it doesn't follow the acronym PHP. It looks like a HTTP here. The people that develop PHP call it personal home page. But as time went on, they later changed the name to Hypertext Preprocessor. That is, you process the text, the hypertext, that is animated text. You process it in a web server before it is displayed on a browser. So that's why we call it preprocessor. So it's a language that passes your page before it can be displayed on the client computer. Now, what does PHP do? It handles connection to database. It handles communication with database. For example, look at Facebook. When you register on Facebook, you likely supply your name, your first name, your surname, and that information you are going to write PHP code so that the information can be stored in a database. So the code that takes whatever you enter when you are registering on Facebook, the code that take it and store it in a database is what referred to as a PHP. And by the time the user comes back to log into Facebook, the Facebook owner has written PHP code so that when you enter your username and password, the code will look for whether the username and password is in the database of Facebook. And immediately it finds it, they are going to write code again to display your picture and even suggest friends to you on the Facebook. So PHP handles connection to database and communication with the database. Just tell the PHP the name of the database, where it is located, and PHP code will handle the remaining. So it connects to the database, it passes your instruction to database, and return the response of database back to you. But the problem with PHP is that it doesn't work on the client browser. It's not what browser you can handle. It has to be processed on the server before it can be displayed on the browser. Now that will lead us to MySQL. SQL means Structured Query Language. It is a special purpose programming language designed for managing data that we store in a relational database management system. Now, it is a database software that is used to create, store, and manipulate database in a web database application. Now let me say here that before you can begin to take people data, maybe somebody register on your site and you store it in the database, you have to create the database first. You create the amount of information you are requesting. Probably you want to gather the surname, the first name, the address, and the place of work, for example. You are going to design a database that captures those 4 data. So you are going to design your field, that is the column of your database. So the procedure for designing this is handled by SQL. You need to learn how to write SQL. But there is a good news here. You may not need to bother yourself with SQL code. There is a software called PHPMyAdmin that simplifies creation of database. So, but the point here is MySQL will create database. It's going to store the database and manipulate it in your website. It also works on the server side. As we continue, I'm going to explain more about this so you know what database is by the time we get to MySQL. Now, the 7th technology, or the 6th you will need, is what we refer to as web server. The common type of web server is Apache web server. And by the time you begin to write PHP and MySQL, you will need to install Apache server on your system. It's free, you can download it and they are usually bundled together with PHP compiler and MySQL compiler, and they are bundled in form of WAMP, call it WAMP, W-A-M-P, or XAMPP, X-A-M-P. And what is the meaning of W-A-M-P? W means window, A means Apache, M means MySQL, and P means PHP. They are bundled together so that they can interpret whatever PHP or SQL code you write. So the server that interprets it is what we refer to as Apache Web Server. Now when you type a web address or Uniform Resource Locator URL into your web browser, you are sending a message to the web server at that URL, asking it to send you an HTML file. So the web server responds by sending requested file. Your browser read the HTML file and display the web page. Now, I don't want to bore you more here, but the point here is you will need a web server to interpret your PHP and MySQL. And a very good example is Apache Web Server, which we are going to make use of in this course. Then you need programming editors and integrated development environment, which I call IDE. Now all the technologies I've mentioned, such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, and MySQL, you will write all this code using what we call a programming editor. Now, you may use ordinary text editor like a Notepad or WordPad or Windows to write PHP program. But there are better editors. If you don't have access to them, you can still make use of them. Now, we call these editors, we call them programming editors or integrated development environment. Now, I want to tell you that in this course, you may not need to buy any software or to look for it. Notepad is enough to develop your website. But I will explain the advantage of programming editors and IDE in website development. Now, programming editors and IDEs, they offer features that can save you amount of time during development. It's what I've encountered before. When I'm writing my code using ordinary Notepad, it will be difficult to locate error or to even know the line number. There is nothing like line number in Notepad. But I want to tell you that we have programming editors that offer many features such as color highlighting of part of your code, line number, indentation. They will help you to organize your code. And a very good example is PHP Designer. Another one I want to mention is a Notepad++. There is a better version of Notepad which is called Notepad++. You have to download it, it's free. Notepad++ is also a very good programming editor. Apart from programming editor, we also have what we call integrated development environment. It's an entire workspace for developing application. It includes programming editor as well as other things like a debugging, reviewing your website, testing your website, and file transfer protocol to transfer your site from your computer to the hosting server, and even backup of your site. And a very good example is Adobe Dreamweaver. I would recommend that you download Adobe Dreamweaver or you buy it and install it on your system. Because by the time we start writing PHP, even before PHP, I will show you how to use Adobe Dreamweaver. Another integrated development environment is what we call Visual Studio. But you will need Visual Studio if you are using Microsoft technologies for developing your website, like ASP.NET or Visual Basic or Visual C#. If you are interested in Microsoft technology, you may want to subscribe to our training on ASP.NET or Visual Basic or Visual C#. But in this course or in this training, we are focusing on PHP. We are not using ASP.NET to program our website. We are focusing on PHP, and Adobe Dreamweaver is very good for writing a PHP code. And if you want to use ASP.NET, that is where you need Visual Studio. So we are limiting ourselves here to Dreamweaver. Now, before we round up this session, let's look at client and server side of a website. Remember, I mentioned client earlier on and I explained server. Among the technologies or tools used in building a website, only the HTML, CSS, JavaScript or Visual Basic script run on the client computer, while PHP and MySQL run on the server. Now let me explain this. If you write HTML, CSS and JavaScript, your browser can handle them. Your browser like Opera, Mozilla or Internet Explorer, IE, they can handle this code and interpret them into the form that your user will see. But when you are beginning to develop database using MySQL, Microsoft Access or Oracle, and you are also writing programming language like PHP, ASP, ASP.NET, C# or Java Server Page, JSP, Java Server Page. If you are using this technology, they can never run on your browser. They run on the server where you host your site, and they will be sent back to the browser in form of HTML. So you can see that all your PHP and MySQL, they have to be interpreted back to HTML format, which the browser on the client side can handle. So that is the difference between the client and server side of a website. These are the technologies running on the client side, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But on the server side, PHP and MySQL will run there. Now, in the next video, you will start learning what I call HTML basics. Thank you for listening.